You're listening to the Conscious Briefing Show podcast on Anchor FM.
Alrighty. Welcome back to another edition of the Conscious Briefing podcast. My name is Jason Batt and I will be your host for today's podcast. It is now just got after 5 o'clock on this lovely rainy. I mean, you can see the sun is actually shining. You can see the sunshine, but it's actually raining. Yeah, now where I am laying at the moment. That's now the 9th of March 2020. And yes, we are going to talk about renewable energy. I think I want to explain now. Why I brought up this topic. But there is a post that I saw on my Facebook account. It was about farmers being blocked from putting up solar panels. So I wanted to get into it, and then I spoke to somebody that I know on the one Facebook group that I'm on, called, his name is John Alexander, and I was fascinated in what he was saying, and it I thought to myself, I wanted to tackle this man's brain a bit, and then I invited him, and I said, you know what, John, let's put this words of yours that you're saying, let's put it onto voice. Let's get the public out there, hear what they got to say, what you got to say about renewable energy. So yeah, he's joining me today for the podcast. But before we get into the podcast, I always like to give a little quick introduction. So my introduction, my intro is renewable energy is energy that is collected from renewable sources which are naturally replenished on a human timescale, such as sunlight, wind, rain, tides, waves, and geothermal heat. The question here is, can renewable energy be used to curb the means of load shedding, and can the public use this to help Eskom? Okay, now, like I said, a lot of us do know what renewable energy is, and we all know it's from solar panels and these wind terminals, and dams have got these massive generators where water passes through. We know that stuff, but this is what caught my attention, and why the farmers have been blocked. Why can't they put solar panels up in it, and then obviously try and help Eskom to feed the unused power that the solar panels are generating, feed it into the grid? So yeah, that's just something that's quite interesting. So let's get into this quickly. Get John on the line, and then I'll ask him the questions on what was interesting. Okay, cool. Okay, John.
Jason,
how are you? Oh, you're right. Okay, we on now.
Very well, thanks, and you?
Thank you for joining my podcast.
Great.
I really appreciate it. Before we get into the quick listeners out there and the viewers out there, give them a quick intro, who you are.
Right. Basically, my background is technical and sales and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
My speciality was actually instrumentation, measuring the flow of liquids and gases and pressures and temperatures, and I was quite involved with the power station, power generation market. I worked with Siemens for about 9 years.
Yeah.
So I did get a bit of knowledge on that in that industry that way.
Okay, no, good. Well, the reason why I'm having this podcast is there was an article that surfaced on Facebook about farmers, why they've been blocked. Are they being blocked from not using installing solar panels in their backyards? And then you were discussing with me, so one thing led to another, and I just quite interesting. I thought to myself, no, let me get you on the show, and we spoke to each other, and yeah, we are renewable energy.
What I'd like to just say, first of all, in opening, is that I'm not anti-renewable per se.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is actually go through a few points so we can get a clear understanding what renewable energy is actually about.
Yes, that's
because
right.
a lot of about this whole story. People see these flashy panels and they see these windmills turning and say, oh, look at that. And it's because we're not used to it, we don't understand what goes on behind it.
That's it.
We just see free electricity coming from the wind and from the sun.
Yeah.
So really what we need to do is go into a bit more detail so people can actually understand.
That's it. So that's my first question. My first question is,
Yeah.
give us a quick rundown on what renewable energy is. I know there's a lot of us out there that do understand what renewable energy is, and I'm probably just starting to learn myself. I don't fully understand it, but from what you see on YouTube and what you see on news, it's more or less it makes sense.
Sure.
But yeah, can you give us a quick rundown on it?
Look, if we actually look at what renewable energy actually is, it's actually what they call variable renewable energy.
Mm-hmm.
Wind energy is really not renewable energy, for example. It's only really renewable electricity.
Okay.
Renewable energy is energy that's produced, for example, from a dammed hydro scheme where water is available and generating electricity through a generator.
Yes.
Or biomass, which is basically burning of wood and making steam and turning a generator.
Mm-hmm.
The other source of renewable energy is geothermal. But we don't have those sources in South Africa because you need quite a high temperature of water to generate steam or take the steam to turn a turbine.
Yes.
The last three I mentioned, which were the biomass, hydroelectricity, geothermal, those are true renewables because you can replant trees. You can, for biomass, for example, to make wood and make charcoal or whatever you want to do.
Correct.
And the hydroelectricity generation is basically coming from nature because that's from rainfall filling up a dam. So that is the renewable for that side. The geothermal, it's renewable until the source degenerates, if it does degenerate, because it's being heated from an underground system. And that will eventually, that can change. It depends on constant, a lot of engineering is needed to actually source it and find out, is it the right type of energy? Can we tap into it? The biggest problem that we have with renewables is that it is weather dependent, and that's what people don't understand.
Mm.
If the wind is blowing, the turbine will turn. If the wind doesn't blow, it won't turn.
Yeah, they say it's about 30%. You can get 30% from wind and sun, not the full. Well, they would hope that you can get 75% out of it. Yeah.
No, you can't. This is where the whole confusion comes in. The actual efficiencies of both solar and wind are actually very, very low. You're looking in the region of about 18 to 25, maybe 30% if you're lucky, of the available converted. And that is the problem. People think, you're going to get a lot of energy from the wind.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It depends on a few things. First of all, it depends on the velocity of the wind, because if it's too slow, you're not going to get energy generated because the turbine won't turn.
Yeah, true.
If it's too slow, then the turbine can't operate because it'll overspeed and get hot and seize. So you have limits to the beginning and the end of where an actual wind generator can operate. And the wind doesn't blow constantly. It goes in bursts. So it's one moment it drops completely down to zero. Yes. The next moment it goes up. And we've seen this as young men, a lady walking down the road and the wind blows her dress up, and that's what's called by the gust. Right?
You're like in Cape Town. We get that a lot in Cape Town.
Yeah, correct. And if you actually see it on a windsock at an airport, and you see the windsock dropping and rising, and rising, and that is because of the nature of the wind. It's inconsistent and it's intermittent.
Yeah, not only mentioned, this is not enough. It's not enough power to feed into the grid. I mean, you need much more megawatts to keep the grid sustainable. But yeah, like you said, this is not happening, and people don't seem to grasp that. Yeah, you're right.
Well, that's why they have to have a number of wind generators to combine the energy to be able to have enough energy to generate something that's worthwhile.
Yeah. Germany seems to be doing quite a good job on there. I don't know from what I watch on YouTube and that, but I could speak under correction.
Well, what we first of all have to understand is that wind energy is really a very old technology that's been regurgitated. It's really back from the 1800s.
Yeah.
And our demand for energy became greater. It was basically assigned to the archives, because it is not an efficient system for generation. It's only when people have now said, oh, we can get energy from the wind because of a power issue. So let's reinvent this technology. And so they've come up with newer designs using modern computer systems like 3D modeling for the blade designs and better gearbox design and drivetrain, etc., electronics. However, you still sit with the fundamental issue that irrespective of that, you've got limitations that are natural limitations that you can't overcome with design.
Exactly, yeah.
And the biggest problem for what we need in our operation of a modern economy is energy on demand. We want to walk up, switch on a light or switch off a light. We want to switch on a computer and have energy immediately. Our batteries are charging. That's what we want. And we pay, when we go and buy things, our normal way we purchase is on demand. If someone says, oh, look, I can supply you 400 loaves of bread, but I can only supply on a weekly basis of 100 loaves.
That sounds like socialism.
I'm not going to buy them. I'll buy from someone who can supply me what I want and when I want it.
Yeah.
And that is good.
It's typical socialism, that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that wind hasn't got its uses. Yes, it has. If we look at a farmer would typically can use a windmill to pump water, or for entertainment use, like windsurfing and sailing. Those are typical uses that it still has today. But for generating electricity, it's really, really a real questionable issue. On a different hand, solar was invented essentially to replace wind as a modern form of generation of free electricity. That's where it came from. The problem is it's got the same issues. It's weather dependent. The sun doesn't shine during the day. It doesn't shine at night. It shines when the conditions are perfect. And that's when the actual cell that generates electricity will operate. But it's affected by the seasons. You guys in Cape Town, you have late starts in the morning because of the sun in winter, and it goes down a hell of a early. So your limits of how much electricity you can actually extract out of the sun energy. Yeah. And what has happened now is people have seen this market. They say, yes, we can use solar. Yeah, sure. Solar's got specific markets. Remote desalination plant. Remote areas where there's electricity needed, like in a health facility, in a way out place where there's no power. Called household use. You can use it for houses or business parks. Space exploration, satellites use solar. So they have got them. But the biggest problem that people don't understand, and they keep on saying, oh, it's cheap. It is not cheap. Solar is still the most expensive way to generate electricity. It's scientifically proven, it's tested, people have done experiments.
And then you'll get the people out there that will complain and fight with climate change and what damage it's, what effect it's got on the carbon footprint. it goes on. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of issues that come with it that are used for obfuscation. In other words, to go for a political onsen, and we must get the politics out of the way when we look at these things, because then we become emotional.
Yeah, I agree.
The problem that's what has actually led to the demand of renewables is basically that people said, oh, the Earth's temperature is rising because of global warming. That was a theory, and that was generated by United Nations. Yes. And the IPCC, which is essentially a political arm of the United Nations. And basically, the United Nations, people like to accept it or not, is infested with all sorts of characters and unelected officials. It's got despots, everyone from every single country. They can even be a terrorist supporting nation. They're accepted by the United Nations.
True.
Really what happens is the United Nations is a bureaucratic proxy for certain elites. And it's essentially banks that control them, and that's really where it comes from. So they've actually used an agenda using renewable energy as part of the drive for electricity and to become what they call sustainable.
Yeah.
And that whole thing about sustainability is very, very questionable.
But this is the thing.
Yep.
On to my next question. At what scale are farmers and other business implementing solar grids on their backyards? Because the national regulator recently, they implemented a process for registration to allow farmers and other businesses to legally generate their own power. But yeah,
look, I can't give you the scale of the market. I honestly don't know how big the markets are. Yes, farmers are using it. Farmers
we see it a lot.
So,
there's a lot of people installing their solar panels. Yeah.
Sure, but what people don't understand, everyone's saying, "Oh, we can feed into the grid." First of all, the reason why they're wanting farmers and others to register is for certain size of generators and to be compliant if they want to feed a grid. But we're not talking about feeding Eskom. We're talking about small grids like municipal grids.
Yeah.
And that is really where they're trying to get into. But the experiments that they're doing at the moment, when you see these big wind farms, is they are trying to get into a market which they're not suitable for.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned to you, the demand for electricity is on a supply and demand basis, and you want it now, and you must be able to provide it now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I've got no objection for private generation at all. Yes, they have their place, and if they can supply to a particular market, that's fine, provided you can afford it. And this is what people are missing. So what's happening? You've got clever salespeople trying to create a viable market by saying, "Oh, listen, if you buy these solar panels, you can recover all your expenses. You can deliver your excess energy back into the grid. Just sign the bottom line, we'll make it happen."
Yeah. And
it's not true. There's a lot of other factors involved. First of all, when can they produce electricity? And will the municipality need the electricity at the time they can generate? Yeah. You're not going to generate all the time. You can only generate when conditions are favorable. And people, again, are being misled, thinking, "Oh, this is a quick way. We can get free electricity, we can recover all our costs, and we sell the excess into the grid, and that way we basically get free electricity." And that is not what's going to happen.
Yeah, because this is what's happening now. People are now gone that option. They've been told they can put their grids up, put the solar panels, and try and help Eskom. But now there was this article that surfaced, and that South African farmers are getting blocked from helping solve load shedding. This is now the whole story about it. Then, is it really happening, or farmers being blocked, or municipalities blocking them?
I don't believe they are. I think it's being politically driven by the industry and the lobbyists of those industries. Sure, the farmer, like anyone else, would like to reduce his costs. He'd also like to be independent of Eskom, and of course, now they use exactly the same ploy that they've used with the other markets, saying, "Oh, you can feed into the grid and cover your costs." So it's really appealing to the farmer.
Yes.
But the farmers generally buy the electricity directly from Eskom, not from the municipalities.
Right. Yeah, they buy direct from Eskom. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, correct. And they get it at a much lower tariff.
The municipalities are buying electricity from Eskom and redistributing the electricity to the consumer. Farmers are buying directly. So what they're trying to do now is have two different markets that they can sell their products into. The agricultural demand patterns are totally different from a domestic situation. Farmers get up in the morning and they go to bed late at night. And depending on the type of farming. Are they doing packaging? Are they just basically producing a product and then selling the mealies, for example, to a mill?
Yeah.
And people are missing understanding where what the farmers need that energy for and where they need it, when they need it. Sure, everyone would like to be able to generate their own electricity.
Yes. I think what's happening here is, like we just mentioned, and people are being influenced to buy the solar panels. The question here is, could feeding the grid solve our load shedding problems? I think Chris Yelland, I read an article today that he said that the possibilities for renewable energies is there. It's enormous, and it could, if people put up these solar panels, they could help Eskom. But this is the argument that we're having here now. Yay or nay, it can't, because it's not sustainable enough. So,
I don't
so
think
false hope has been spread amongst the nation. Yeah.
No, I would agree with you there. As again, it's an industry trying to get into a playing field that isn't theirs. They've got their area of where they can supply a product, but the other market looks so attractive because it's so huge, and so they say, "Oh, we can make money out of this," and that is what the drive is. Your question was, could feeding the grid solve our load shedding issues?
That's the idea, because we as South Africans, I mean, we just, firstly, it's not load shedding. We should be, it's correction. It's blackouts. It's pure rolling blackouts.
Yeah. Well, the load shedding is caused by an unstable grid, and the instabilities need to get controlled by Eskom, so they shed the load. In other words, they reduce the demand so they can supply to certain industries that they're obligated to supply in the first instance. So they have arrangement with certain guys. Can they reduce, companies, can we reduce our supply to for a certain period? Because they just don't have enough energy.
Yeah.
Everyone's now getting this bandwagon. Oh, what we can do, we can all put up these panels and these windmills, and they will then reduce Eskom's problem. Eskom will get a reduced demand, yeah, but the scale has got to be pretty large. And the big problem is how the electricity is sold to Eskom, because Eskom is a stable grid. It runs at a particular frequency. We have all heard, we buy stuff. We have 220 to 240 volts at 50 hertz. And that is specifically a requirement for the grid. All our motors and our engines, our pumps for our swimming pools, our equipment, our fridges, our stoves, all have been designed around a specification that operates at 220 volts to 240 volts plus minus 10% at 50 hertz.
That's right.
And got a tolerance of around 1%, so it's 49.5 to 50.5. If the frequency is not stable, the grid starts to give problems and it starts to collapse, and then they've got to shed. They've got to shed to control the grid. So yes,
I read
help. It would help if a domestic market can use solar water heaters, for example.
Yeah.
And be able to produce electricity for when they need it. Where Eskom is struggling, but as a continuous source, I don't think it will work. And besides that, can they afford it is the main question, because everything seems to be free, and it's nothing. There are no free lunches.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to buy batteries. You're going to have to buy all the equipment.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. It could work if there was like these massive batteries, if we had massive batteries. But again, how much of those batteries are going to cost? And then, of course, with the demand that we have, how long will a battery last to supply into the grid?
Well, we'll get on to batteries a bit later, because that's another point entirely. And, the batteries are not cheap. But I think people must realize that you can store electricity in a battery, but it's a very expensive way of storing electricity.
It's very expensive,
In batteries, it's already stored for Eskom in the form of coal. And it's already in the energy is already stored in water in the case of a hydrostatic hydro scheme. The energy is stored in the water. Those are the batteries.
Mhm.
To try
Yes,
and
I saw pictures of it. Yes, that's right.
huge amounts of electricity in
Yes.
batteries, massively expensive.
Mm. So to conclusion on that question, can it help? Farmers and on all other business people, they think they're going green and they're going to help Eskom plug in their power into the grid. But then, of course, a lot of them have been saying that then they don't want to be charged. They don't want to get a monthly bill because they're trying to help Eskom feed the grid. But yeah, it's
Well, it's got a problem because they can't use the energy that's been produced. And if we take a look at the Eskom figures that they put out, I think the last report was in 2018. They basically, what I looked at when I saw the report is in 2007, Eskom was generating 42,600 megawatts.
Mm-hmm.
In 2019, they generated 44,100 megawatts. That was the capacity that they had. So since then, between 2007 and 2019, Eskom have added basically 4 megawatts to the grid, which is nothing. But if you start doing you start calculating and looking back of how much they actually use, they can actually use very, very little of the energy they've been given because it's produced when they don't need it. It's produced early morning, possibly when the sun comes up, and when they actually need it at night time, they can't get it because the wind isn't blowing in summer, and the sun's not shining.
Demand, yeah.
When I looked at the figures, the actual efficiency of the renewables was only 31.5%. That was the actual efficiency of the solar and the wind. I subtracted from that
that's a 30% that was
used for generation because.
Yeah.
Pardon?
No, I said that's a 30%. That 31%. Yeah, that's the 30% I was mentioning.
Efficiency.
Yeah.
Where a power station generating from coal is running at an 80% efficiency. Solar is only running. Solar and wind is 31%.
Yeah, a power station will give 1,000 megawatts per square meter, while these wind turbines will only give 2.5.
Yeah, if you can look at, if you start doing calculations, if you start doing land area calculations, that's a totally different kettle of fish, and then maybe we can look at that at a later time.
Yeah.
But Eskom's problem is they've got a shortage of electricity. They're being forced to buy electricity. The whole of the expenditure on IPPs, the IPPs or the solar and wind only gave them 4% of the electricity, but it cost them 25% roughly to pay for this electricity.
Sure.
It's just an economical nightmare for them, and they can't use it.
Yeah, well, it's no wonder why they're looking for that 49 billion bailout.
Oh, absolutely.
Taxpayers' money.
It'll actually get worse.
Yeah, it's going to get worse, definitely. I had a podcast with somebody and he told me that we're going to have a complete blackout sooner or later. It's there. It's bound to happen.
Sorry, you broke up there?
I said it's bound to happen. We're going to have a blackout where we're going to have total darkness. It's going to happen.
Well, that would be a frightening situation.
Because of the grid that's so unstable.
We'll end up having no electricity then for a few weeks because if one cold start a power station, it's a nightmare.
Exactly. Yeah. There are theories. There are theories that this whole renewable energy could be another scam. I think we touched a little bit on it, but yeah, you were speaking to me about it.
I believe it is a scam.
Yeah.
There's an old adage: if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck. There's a lot of twists and turns in this whole scam, so it's going to take a little bit of digging to explain it, and it's quite tricky.
We've got time. We've got time.
Okay.
We got time.
There are political issues and environmental issues, and the rest of it is simply lies and skullduggery.
Mm-hmm.
The whole scam has risen through the policy of the government, which is a government political policy. And that policy is called the Integrated Resource Plan. And it's basically based on the United Nations agenda of global sustainability. So this is one of the key words that you'll see. If the moment you see the word sustainability, you immediately know that the United Nations has got involved. Now, why I say this, an institution called IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, and it's also an intergovernmental organization, and it's part of the United Nations. It's another tentacle of United Nations. Mm-hmm. And I read verbatim a statement that they issued, I think it was in June last year, so it's fairly recent. It says here, renewable power is the backbone of any development that aims to be sustainable. We must do everything that we can do to accelerate renewables if we are to meet the climate objectives of the Paris Agreement. Now, the Paris Agreement, as everyone knows, Trump has pulled out of it, and he's upset the apple cart. And the reason why he pulled out of it is he could see that America was being pulled into an agreement that did not look after their citizens. And he said America first.
Yes.
And of course, everyone's throwing the toys out the cot and berating President Trump, but he's done it for a particular reason, because he can actually see through this whole scam. Just as those words, Paris Agreement and sustainable development should tell you automatically in a sustainable future where they're coming from.
Yeah.
We must also understand, and people, I don't know that agree with me, but it's my opinion, that this is an ANC government is following a UN socialist agenda. So what happened, they came up in this whole thing with a term energy mix. And this whole energy mix demand is essentially a political demand.
Of course.
And they're trying to force the renewable energy into society, into countries. And because it doesn't meet the demand or doesn't meet the requirement, it can't be really used. And the problem is, it's fine to have all these grand schemes and saying, oh, we have to have, this is the energy mix and this is part of the RP. It's fine if you want to compare comparable generators. The thing is, they are not comparable. They don't produce when electricity is needed. Simple as that. So a grid relies specifically on stable generation, on demand generation, as and when it's needed. Renewables cannot deliver as and when needed electricity.
Yeah.
So this is where a lot of the problem comes in. So the energy mix argument is simply an attempt to justify a non-compliant entrant into the market acting as an energy producer. They are not in the correct space of that market. They have a space, but they cannot provide what is demanded. The demand says we want dispatchable electricity. It's got to be reliable and clean. So they've seen, oh, clean must be to do with coal. No, it's not. Clean energy is really to do with free of harmonics, wave distortion. We talk about clean power.
Yes.
And the type of electricity that is being generated by renewables is not very clean. It's quite unstable type of power. It's got a lot of distortion in the frequency, and the harmonics are added into it. And so it doesn't really meet the compliance requirements. So really, it's a non-compliant product, and it shouldn't be even in the energy mix. It's purely a politically correct term. I make some statements. I say it's actually fraudulent, because what they want to do, they want to play in this market, but they don't want to accept the rules. So it's like we're going to play rugby, but we want to put our hands in the scrum and do as we please, and you just have to put up with it. And you're not allowed to tackle us, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. So, this whole story of renewables is so suspect. Both solar and wind do not meet the requirement because of simple natural facts. They're weather dependent. They're dependent on the season.
Mm-hmm.
Humans can't predict the weather to any accuracy, and we can't control the weather or the seasons. So how can you even think of having something to connect to your grid that you have no control over? You have control over coal, you have control over nuclear, you have control over renewables like hydro, because you can let the water out the dam at a particular velocity or a certain amount of cubic meters per second to generate your power. So you can actually control that, and you can get the grid back in the particular frequency you need, which is 50 hertz, and at the right voltage that you need.
Yes.
It's the stability, this intermittency is the problem because of the gusts. And this is a massive technical difficulty for a supplier, a company like Eskom, to actually control this instability. And this instability is giving absolute headaches for Eskom to control.
Of course, yes.
And that's why I'm saying that the energy that they're being provided is just, it's just not usable. So, as I said, to renewable energy is really a politically correct fashion statement because it meets the demands of the United Nations requirements. It meets the political demand of the RP, which complies with the NDP, the National Development Plan.
Yeah.
Right? So they're intertwined. And it's really a political statement. It's nothing to do with technical capability of the product. The product doesn't meet that spec. So the product, what's actually happened is the politicians who've been put under pressure by public, to try and resolve this energy problem. So a whole lot of lobbyists got together and they spoke to the politicians and they said, oh, we've got a product for you. It's green. It can deliver your electricity. It's going to be fantastic. And this will solve your problem. So, of course, the politicians are just too pleased to tell their masses, we've got a solution. It meets all the requirements of these policies. It's green electricity. It doesn't pollute. Blah 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 blah. And they were so happy that now this was going to be the solution. So what we have to look is how this was constructed. We have very, very clever financial people and very clever legal people in this country. So they could see the opportunity of to make money.
Of course, I was going to say that, money. Just the money making thing.
That's actually what it's about. It's actually money making scheme. It's going to be funded by the consumer.
Exactly, and you were talking about Trump. Yeah, you were talking about Trump.
Yeah.
And Bernie Sanders. He's that man. He's been making money off political decisions.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So what happened? These financial elites that got together, and they managed to get hold of the corrupt politicians that had a vested interest in this. And they said, listen, you can skim some money off this for yourselves. This is how it's going to work, but we need your support to bring this in. It meets all the requirements for the policy. It's green, it's renewable, and that's exactly what you guys need, and we can help you with that. But there are some things which you need you to do. So they said, okay, well, let's look at this, how we can resolve this issue for you. The problem is normal energy is a lot cheaper than the solar and the wind. So to make it look more attractive, they had to start with increasing the cost of the fuels that we use for generation. So fuel levies was a good one. You could just increase the costs of diesel. the cost of petrol. Now,
which,
diesel
which we've seen, yeah.
can be used for generation of electricity. So an individual can still generate his own electricity using a generator,
Yes.
running on diesel. But that now puts the people who want to sell solar panels noses out of joint. So it's better if you can just increase the fuel levy, and then while you're at it, let's implement a CO2 tax, because that is what will also help push up the cost, and we can say, oh, it's an environmental thing, the CO2 is affecting the environment when it's not. They're talking about emissions and CO2, they're two different things totally. But it's a convenient penalty for people to pay. You can add the cost of CO2 onto anything that generates electricity.
Of course, yeah.
So by increasing these levies and CO2 taxes as penalties to a particular market, makes them starting to look a lot cheaper. So essentially, artificially, they reducing their prices, but artificially increasing the prices of their own competitors, the people that compete against them. So it's really a political move. The other one was to use tax incentives and subsidies and concessions to support the industry. So this entices customers to buy these products because they're basically being funded by the taxpayer, and they can use them as tax deductibles. So it's hell of a very attractive for a business to start supporting this, because they can make more profit.
Yeah.
Environmental issue is a huge issue. It's going to be difficult to go through all the green issues here, because it's that on its own is going to take a good hour to talk about.
Yeah, we'll just get Greta Thunberg. Greta can.
Yeah. The reason why wind and solar look so attractive is because it's got a low operating cost, with no fuel, and that is what makes it the contender to be a primary technology. So, geez, it's cheap. There's no capital. It's a lower capital cost. We don't have any fuel components, so that doesn't matter. So this must be a fantastic technology. It's going to be cheap. We can produce electricity for next to nothing. But that's how it works. It's really an emotional political argument that's used, and they ignore the facts. The other part of the scam which I've picked up is the way this whole PPA, the power purchase agreement, is constructed. Normally, if you're going to enter into agreement to supply someone something, you would have penalties imposed on you if you don't meet the demand. So really, the lawyers have got involved with this, and the commercial clever guys in commerce and economics came up with a very clever way to do it. So the problem was that the PPAs had to be disguised to meet the requirements of the grid. Now we know they don't meet the requirements because they can't meet the requirements of dispatchability. In other words, on demand, as and when needed. And that is the core issue. Other players in this market, like the people that sell electricity using open cycle gas turbines, they have strict requirements. They have to be able to provide as and when it's needed, at a particular frequency and a particular voltage. And if they don't supply, there are penalties for non-compliance. So those particular players have to conform to a certain standard. Yet renewable energy, solar and wind, don't have to comply to that demand. So what they did, they were clever. They changed the requirement to a quota. So now it's no longer on as and when needed. It's now on a quota system. So they call this a take or pay basis. So as long as they can deliver a contracted amount or obligation, they will be paid. This is a big issue for Eskom. Eskom are compelled by law, because it was mandated by government. They entered into this agreement with these IPPs. Eskom has to pay because it was guaranteed and mandated by the government. This ties them into a 20-year agreement, which I understand from the point of view where they need a term to cover their investment. It also has a guaranteed annual CPI increase. So what happens now is Eskom is now compelled to buy electricity when they don't need it. It's going to force them to enter into they've been forced now by government to enter in this 20-year agreement with annual increases.
Sure.
They have no control. It was mandated. So Eskom now effectively debt trapped. The ministers involved at the time, one of them was Jeffrey Derby at the time. If you remember, he signed 27 IPP agreements in one day, and a month or two later, he was no longer involved. And happened to be friends with some very well-connected people in the IPP market. I think one of them was his brother-in-law. But what's happened is the ministers of the ANC were actually led into a trap. They didn't understand the technical fundamental requirements of what Eskom actually needed. They thought they knew, but they're not technical people.
Interesting, yeah.
And what has happened, they've got themselves into a trap now, and they're going to be very embarrassed to try and get out of this trap. And essentially, they've already tied in already for 20 years. They might as well try and ride the wind or ride the wave and try and get out of that one. That is really where the problem has come in, because, as I said earlier, 25% of Eskom's cost of total production gives them only 4.8% of the energy, which can't be actually delivered as and when needed. And I'm going to quote from the Eskom 2018 integrated report, and said, our internal operating surplus capacity situation is worsened as we are required to sign contracts with RPPs on a take or pay basis, while we're in a position where we experience an operating surplus at times. So in other words, certain times they have a surplus and certain times they don't. But they just have to buy this electricity anyway, even if they can use it or not. They're compelled to. And that's a really, really difficult position. But ANC have now they're in a really embarrassing situation, and they're trying to save face. The IPPs are now being able to demand, because they've now got them by the short and curlies, if you excuse my expression. It's like what the unions are doing. They hold a gun to the head. If you don't comply, we'll expose you. It's a typical extortion tactic. Now, what is now happening is the way they've now been given a new concept to look at by the industry, and said, look, we know our product isn't compliant, but we can make it compliant. How? Oh, we can add batteries, because the batteries will save up, it'll solve the issue.
Yeah.
Now, they've tried batteries in a lot of places in the world and it hasn't worked. Australia tried it. They spent 150 million Australian dollars on a 100 megawatt battery from Tesla, from Mr. Musk, who is a South African.
Yeah, Mr. Musk himself. Yeah.
Most people know that. It lasted 4 minutes and then delved South Australia into the dark. Now being used as a guinea pig again by this industry. In other words, it's a further industrial experiment to use batteries, because batteries is going to save our butts. And don't worry, the taxpayer will pay for it.
Naturally.
Really,
naturally, yeah.
Yeah. And this is really what's happening. So the objective of the battery ad is basically to attempt to make renewables a commodity, right? Because the PPAs are really on solving the issue, because they can't solve Eskom's problem. And people have latched onto it, and of course the government have latched onto it, and people are very, very embarrassed and say, we have to solve this. Oh, we can solve it. So what we do, we use batteries. Batteries can store the electricity that we generate when Eskom don't need it, and we put this into batteries, and when Eskom need it, we can supply it to them. So this will solve a few issues for us. It will solve the intermittency issue, the instability issue when the wind isn't blowing and the wind's blowing too fast or too slow. It will also solve the stability issue, because we can give Eskom stable supply and we can store this electricity, so therefore we can solve the on-demand issue. The thing that people don't realize, it sounds all very nice and good, but batteries are the most expensive methods of trying to store energy. There was a study that has been done, and it actually increases the cost of renewable electricity by a factor of 15 to 20.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the people supplying renewables, if they now go and when they now quote on the new lot, they have to, and they're going to add battery cost to it, it's going to put them way, way out of the market. So our ministers said, okay, don't worry, what we'll do, we'll get the consumer will pay for the cost of electricity. Eskom will have to bear the cost. In other words, Eskom must now put these batteries in place for this private industry people to benefit from.
But how? They don't even have the cash.
They don't have the cash. So they get more people to borrow, to promise Eskom, okay, we'll lend you the money, to say to Eskom, yeah, but it's going to come at a cost. Then what happens is the taxpayers now called in to start bailing out Eskom again.
Yes.
So adding batteries is not going to solve the issue. It's just going to increase the problem for Eskom. It's going to make them more indebted.
Like these tenders. Yeah, it's all these tenders that generate more cash. That's all it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole scheme is very, very cleverly constructed. We don't meet a particular requirement that's required by Eskom.
Yeah,
We worm our way around it, and then to help us, please, Mr. Minister, you guys are in this. We can expose you. The battery solution is what we need. We know it doesn't work, but we think we can make it work. So how can we do it? Easy. Eskom can pay for it, and the taxpayer will bail them out.
Yeah, it just shows you how gullible we are, eh? The public.
Absolutely.
We can be extremely gullible and just fall for it, eh?
No,
Flip it, I'm stunned.
We are now being forced as a taxpayer to finance R&D development.
But surely, can't one fight this?
And wind.
Can't one fight for this? Take it to court and fight it in court?
Well, who's going to take it to court? Our political parties are supposed to.
But we've got organizations.
I'm actually.
Yeah.
Our politicians are in with it from all the parties.
Yes. But something can be done about this.
I'm actually talking at the moment to the shadow minister of the DA about this. I've actually
no,
20-page document together to try and convince him what has actually happened. He's adamant, no, he doesn't believe there's a scam, but the scam is so clear. It is so clear. Why? Simple question is, why do only certain producers of this market have to comply to a specification on supply and demand, but the renewable market doesn't have to?
Good grief.
Why? They should all, people talk about the playing field must be level, but the playing field is not level. The playing field is only level for the real generators, but the people that can't meet the market are given special treatment.
Good grief.
They're given special with non-compliance to environmental issues. They're given non-compliance or no penalties for disruption of Eskom's actual generation system. There are a lot of things that people don't take into account here. And we've really got, as I said, it's a totally different subject if we have to look at what effect that renewables actually have on the generation system. We talk about things like cycling. When a power station has to cycle, it uses a whole lot more coal, and it's got to cycle down to allow the penetration of these renewables into its space, and it becomes less efficient. And because it's efficient, the operating costs and generation costs go up. But penalized for causing the environmental thing is a whole different fish.
No, of course, yes.
Interesting thing is, again, it's a scam. It's just based on United Nations demand.
Yeah.
And our political parties have fallen for it, and they think this is the right way to go.
Yeah. I mean,
I hope I was clear, Jason.
You have been, John, you have been absolutely awesome. Everything what you said was interesting. Flipping out, caught my attention. Yeah. I was gonna say, did you check the rand yesterday? It's 16 rand now to the dollar. Eh?
Yeah, and over 20 rand to the pound.
Yeah, some people are saying that now it's because of this coronavirus.
That is part of the tactics that are used to scare people and make people panic.
Yeah, and of course it's
the same as climate change. Climate change is there for a purpose. It's to cause people to panic, and people worry about their family, worry about their children, and they will do anything to protect their children and families. It's understandable.
Yeah.
But people are just thinking they're listening to news broadcasts, and let me tell you, the news people, unfortunately, mainstream media, are involved in this whole thing.
Of course. We briefly had a discussion this afternoon about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I told you some of the media sites that I used to have faith in, I no longer have faith in them, and the news is not worthy.
Absolutely, Jason.
Not worthy.
Absolutely.
But coming back to the dollar thing, it's election year this year in the States, and it's also election year in the States. So the Democrats are using this coronavirus now. They probably think it's going to be their winning tickets to see Trump.
Well, that's what they're thinking. But whether people like Donald Trump or not, he's a stupid businessman.
Yeah,
he doesn't need, because he's not in the typical mold of a politician, and so he doesn't follow the path of a typical politician. He can say what he likes.
Yes,
and he can question, and he can make decisions that are politically not unfavorable, but he gets a result. Look at America's economy.
Yeah.
Look at the price of energy. The price of energy with fracking they become self-sufficient. They don't need.
Of course,
oil.
Yes.
I think you can see Saudi Arabia. You saw this morning Saudi Arabia is now having a fight in the oil industry. America's not buying from them anymore, so their market's closed. So they still need the money. They've been living a high life, and now they need money, and so they need more sales. So just drop the price, get more sales, break the cartel, because it's a cartel, and when cartels are involved, then it's monopolization.
Yeah.
And Trump is out of that. They can't monopolize him. They can't hold a gun.
I think he's going to get re-elected. I don't know how you feel. I think he's going to get re-elected.
Well, I would hope so, because he's done wonders for that country.
Yeah, he has.
People are going to jump up and down with that statement I've made, but he's done wonders for that country, and people can't deny it, whether he's
exactly.
liked or not.
And socialists don't like it. They don't like it.
We have to take the emotion out of these arguments that we have about like renewable energy. Take the emotion out of it and look at the facts. But people have to start to admit and understand that renewable, they have a market. Oops, you're gone.
No, I'm here.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I see my battery's going down.
Okay.
On my
we'll have to end it then.
That's right. Just do a quick battery save there. Then you're back again.
Okay.
So yeah, we're going to take the political out of it, and that's difficult because there's a lot of invested interest and there's money there, and some guys have big money.
Yes.
And, when I started tackling this renewables issue, I got attacked from a lot of different sides. I got told that I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm ignorant. And that's prompted me to dig more and deeper and look into it more and more deeply. And my eyes have been opened. I think people have to just start taking away the emotion, look at the facts, study the market. What does the market demand?
Yeah, exactly. But that's just your
renewables have a market.
That's your typical leftist. Your leftist will always do that. He'll always bash you down and bring you down to the ground. I've been having it for a long time now. I mean, the trolls that we have on social media pages, they always bash you down. It's nothing new.
We see this, but you know, the people are just gullible, and people don't focus on reality. They focus on what they want to see and want to believe.
Yeah, it's because they want to belong to this collective mind hive thinking.
Well, it's group think and herd think. It's herd mentality.
And that's what we need to do.
People have just got to start using the noggins.
Yes, absolutely. Individualism is the way forward. I've been saying it for a long time now. Individualism is the way forward.
We all want to be independent from Eskom, but we're not prepared to study why and how to become independent from Eskom.
Yeah, exactly.
But we demand that Eskom buy independent power produce electricity, and if they don't, and people start throwing the toys out the cot, and that is politically driven. Simple as that.
Simple as that, yeah.
If you cannot supply to a market what the market wants, let the consumer decide. That is the free market.
Yeah.
Don't force.
Absolutely.
Buy a product from a market that he doesn't want to buy from. Eskom also.
You spot on.
If they want to sell this electricity, if they want to sell this generated electricity to Eskom, surely Eskom must have the choice to say, if you want to supply me this power, you must deliver it how I want it. I want it at that frequency. I want it when I need it, not having to pay you because you can supply when I don't need it. That's not what I want.
Yeah, of course.
If you want to store it, if you want to store it at your expense. Don't expect Eskom to pay for the batteries to store your electricity. Why?
Yeah.
You want to be, you pay for the batteries, but they can't. The cost and investment is going to increase it by 15 to 20 times the cost of current. They have to increase their cost by 15 to 20 times what it is to be able to supply it. So say, your price is not attractive, I'm not going to buy your product. So we get politicians in the market, and we get politicians involved to lobby ministers who force the issue down on Eskom. The Rater has seen the scam, he understands the scam, and he's starting to ask questions. And when you look at the Eskom integrated report, it's actually quite scary if you study in a bit more detail. If you want a copy, I can mail you a copy, you can take a look at it. It's quite a big document. But there's a presentation that Eskom did which points out exactly what their problem is. And the problem is the IPPs. And they are supplying something that Eskom doesn't need in the form they're getting it. And they're to buy it. And this is what's forcing Eskom into a corner and causing Eskom to collapse. Sure, there are other things that also happened in the past with political decisions, getting rid of all the white technicians and the white engineers and blah, blah. But Eskom are now on their knees, and they're getting just more and more people, the politicians, putting more and more pressure on them to comply to a requirement being demanded by independent power producers. But the independent power producers aren't prepared to supply Eskom as in how Eskom would like the product to be supplied to them. Why must we something that's not suitable, they can't use? And that's really what comes down to.
Of course, yes, sir. John, okay. I'm going to call it because we're speaking for an hour now. I don't want to take up all your time. John, you've been absolutely awesome. I'm glad I've called you onto my podcast. I just hope the people out there, the very connected ones, that they take this information seriously to heart and do something about it, because I feel we should do something about it, but we're not. That's just the thing. We're all too scared. We shut our mouths. We don't want to talk too much. When we can actually fight this.
Because we get so easily vilified, especially on social media.
Exactly.
You know, I've got to a stage where I just try and tell the tell the best I can and try and be as truthful as I can. I
That's
don't
it.
have an agenda for energy companies.
Yeah.
I don't work for wind companies or wind generators. I don't work for anyone. I'm retired. So I don't have an agenda from that
Yeah.
point of view. My agenda is, hey, why must we be forced to pay the exorbitant cost for electricity because some other guy wants to get rich on it?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a consumer and the
Yeah.
taxpayers. Must we privately fund power generation?
Yeah.
If they want to fund it, they can go out to the market and go and raise money and issue shares
Of
and
course.
get shareholders to pay for
Of course.
it.
Yeah.
Why must the consumer, if his price is right, will buy the electricity?
Yeah.
But then an option of where you can buy it from, not being
True.
told you will buy this person and that's how much you'll pay for it, which is really our current situation here.
True. Don't go, John.
But
I'm just going to do my closing quickly, and then I'm going to end the call.
Sure.
But stay on the line. Okay, my podcast is available on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Anchor FM, Pocket Cast, Overcast. There's so many. There's 11 different platforms. And also on YouTube and on BitTube. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining me. John, thank you very much. You've been absolutely awesome. And I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.
pleasure. Glad I could help.
Thanks, Ed.